Well, this year's top stories get to the heart of critical issues like privacy, government transparency, and government overreach. As 2013 comes to a close, we want to take a look back now at 7 of the most important stories we covered that others have underreported or missed altogether. We start with the tragic story of an internet icon whose life ended way too soon. Aaron Swartz was a renowned computer programmer and internet rights activist. He was a frequent guest on RT, where he shared his vision for a free, open internet.
So what it is it's sort of a patriot act for the internet. It allows the government to go to providers like Facebook and Google and so on and ask them for data without a warrant.
What's crazy is to say, oh, the law is unclear, you might be breaking it. What we're going to do is throw you all in jail, seize all the data, shut down the entire website, take all of your money, and then have a decision about whether what you did is illegal or not.
Last January, Swartz took his own life. At the time, he faced federal charges for hacking into an MIT computer network and allegedly stealing millions of academic documents. The charges carried a possible sentence of 35 years.
When Aaron hacked, a poorly written criminal law called him a dangerous criminal. Common sense and conscience knows better. And we are going to change this unjust law.
Family members of the late Swartz say facing federal charges contributed to his death. His suicide highlighted the issue of prosecutorial overreach. Now to the historic summer-long trial of Chelsea Manning, formerly known as Bradley. The Army private was accused of the largest leak of classified information in military history. He was found guilty of leaking hundreds of thousands of secret files to the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks. Mainstream media coverage of the trial was sparse, but RT was at Fort Meade, Maryland, where the court-martial played out every step of the way.
An unprecedented charge, really, a charge which was aiding the enemy for a simple act of providing information to you, journalists.
The military judge found Manning not guilty of that aiding the enemy charge, but guilty on most other charges. He is now serving a sentence of 35 years. And speaking of internet freedom, it's something our next top newsmaker continues to fight for. Julian Assange, the co-founder of WikiLeaks, remains holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. This December marks 3 years since he's been detained in the UK. If he steps foot outside of that embassy, he'll likely be extradited to Sweden. There, he faces questions over alleged sexual misconduct. But he and his supporters fear he'll ultimately be extradited to the United States and charged under the Espionage Act for publishing government secrets on his website. Now on to our next top story, the ever-expanding use of drones in the wars abroad. Back in May, President Obama addressed the secret drone campaign.
Before any strike is taken, there must be near certainty that no civilians will be killed or injured. The highest standard we can set.
But this year, unprecedented scrutiny on Capitol Hill over the effects of innocent civilians being killed in drone strikes in Yemen and Pakistan, and questions over the program doing more harm than good as people demand answers and accountability. And speaking of secretive programs, a large-scale hunger strike at Guantanamo Bay brought attention to the plight of prisoners who have been detained there indefinitely. At the height of the strike, over 100 inmates refused food to protest U.S. policies that have kept them behind bars. As their health deteriorated, many of them were force-fed.
A tube is passed down through a person's nostril and pushed all the way down to their stomach.
Before it's passed down the nose, we lubricate it, and we give the patient a choice. Do they want to have lidocaine, which is an agent that will numb the area, or if they want olive oil to lubricate the tube.
The military announced the end of the hunger strike in September. The 6-month protest led to a revived global focus on closing the base. Over the past year, 11 detainees have been transferred out. President Obama has renewed his vow to shut Gitmo down, but how and when that will happen is unclear. Now to the tragedy in Boston. In April, the Boston Marathon turned into a deadly massacre when 2 bombs exploded near the finish line, killing 3 people and injuring dozens of others. 1 suspect was killed in a police shootout, the other captured and facing the death penalty. But there's a curious twist in the story that has gotten very little coverage. A friend of the Boston bomber, Ibrahim Todashev, was shot to death by authorities in Florida. He was being questioned over his relationship to the bombing suspects. RT caught up with the grieving father that said his son had no ties to the crime. The pictures you are seeing are disturbing.
4 or 5 shots right into the heart. I've never seen things like this, even in the movies. Not in the US, not in Russia, nowhere. Such violence from law enforcement. Nowhere have I seen anything like this.
And rounding out our top stories, we turn to the saga of genetically modified foods. Agricultural giants like Monsanto affect everything from the food that we eat to where our tax dollars go to the success or demise of local farmers. This year, we saw strong opposition to genetically modified foods, but not strong enough to beat the massive lobbying dollars behind corporations like Monsanto. A bailout initiative to get GMOs labeled failed in Washington, but labeling advocates say the fight is not over. And in the coming year, we'll fight to get GMOs labeled in other states and eventually on a federal level. So there you have it. 7 stories we followed up close and in depth. We'll be sure to keep an eye on how they develop in 2014. In Washington, Liz Wahl, RT.